Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about my Week 13 wide receiver starter sets for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about all things wide receiver, starting off with the matchups at the wide receiver position going into Week 13, who has the most favorable and who has the most difficult matchups going into said week. Then after that, we're going to be going over my top 36 rankings at the wide receiver position. It was extremely difficult to break it down to 36 players because every single team is off bye weeks and everyone's playing in Week 13. So there's a lot of talent to be kind of sifted through, but I broke it down to 36 players. Thank you, everybody. Again, let me remind all of you, if you have not yet already, for those of you who already have, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for joining the channel, for clicking that like button, for supporting. I appreciate it. For those of you who haven't, don't forget, get that cursor past Stephon Gilmore, cornerback of the New England Patriots. Click that subscribe button, click the bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content. And if you like today's video, don't forget to click the like button. Hey guys, how's it going? All right, hope everyone's doing well on this beautiful Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Again, before we get going anywhere, I want to pretty much say happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I am very thankful for every single one of you who watch these videos, even those of you who are toxic in the chat and leave dislikes. I really don't care. You guys watch the videos. I appreciate that, so I'm thankful for you guys. So I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving, whether you partake or not. Hopefully everyone's Thursday is awesome, and hopefully fantasy football and the NFL is great tomorrow. So thumbs up to that. All right, other than that, in terms of news, if you have not yet already, I talked about news in the quarterback video, so go check that out. In terms of that, I don't want to repeat myself, so we'll go ahead and we'll just talk about wide receivers straight away for Week 13, and let's talk about matchups, shall we? Let's get into it. All right, starting off, obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers consistently stay atop of the charts in terms of giving up points to opposing wide receivers in half-point PPR scoring formats. Not really much of a surprise this week. Nick Foles really has an opportunity to take advantage of this. Nick Foles in the last couple of weeks, as a team, they have not been successful. They have not been winning games, and they were sort of in that kind of mid-tier wild card race where they could potentially have made a run for it. Unfortunately, they got 2 L's in a row. And I don't think this is a game where the Jacksonville Jaguars can come out and win, but I do believe they're going to come out and they're going to compete. And I think Nick Foles with DJ Chark, Dede Westbrook, Chris Conley, they all have a lot of value in the passing game this week. So I really do believe Nick Foles and the wide receivers for the Jacksonville Jaguars have a lot of value in the Tampa Bay matchup. Moving on. We have the New York Giants playing against Davante Adams, really the only wide receiver on this team. Outside of him, there is really no one that Aaron Rodgers can trust. Marquez Valdes-Scantling has, truth be told, disappeared in the last month of the season. Really has done nothing, literally nothing. Geronimo Allison's gone. Lazard not really getting too many reps. Kumaro, they're all rotating, but it's literally Davante Adams, and I expect them to have a good game this week because of the matchup. We saw Allen Robinson with Mitchell Trubisky have a good week. We need A-Rod to come out and feed the ball to Davante Adams. They did it last week, even in a tough matchup. Hopefully they'll continue to do so. Moving on, the Atlanta Falcons against wide receivers. The Saints should be fine. Michael Thomas is going to be fantastic. I don't really think there's any other wide receivers I want to start. The next best one would be Ted Ginn or Traquan Smith, and I really don't think those guys are wide receiver 3s at best. I think they're wide receiver 4s or 5s with only being played with the upside of a big touchdown. And really, I don't want to touch either of them. Moving on, we have the Minnesota Vikings matchup, which is very favorable for Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Josh Gordon. I expect them to be a pretty good unit this week on the Monday night matchup. It will be inside of a dome stadium, so we don't really... Oh, no, excuse me. It is in Seattle. I got the matchups right here, so I don't forget. So everyone knows what I'm looking at. So it is in Seattle. There could be some weather conditions. If, in fact, there is, the passing game could be affected, so we'll keep an eye on that. But either way, I expect Metcalf, who dropped 3 touchdowns last week, or 3 big plays, and Tyler Lockett, who was very limited in his usage, was often being double-teamed, triple-teamed at times last week. I expect them to be better this week. Moving on, we have the Miami Dolphins matchup, Alshon Jeffrey. If he is 100% healthy this week, I am 100% on the ship of he's a top 30 wide receiver, certainly. But we have to wait and see. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait and see till Sunday. That's what makes it tricky. Having 6 different teams play on a Wednesday night, on a Thursday morning, afternoon night, makes it difficult because you might have to start a player over Alshon Jeffrey because of the uncertainty. But as of right now, he's trending in the right direction. He did participate in practice today. That is a good sign, but I still want to see more before I go ahead and rank him accordingly. Anyway, moving on. Miami Dolphins matchup is beautiful. The Eagles giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers. Even though last week Metcalf As I mentioned, Lockett didn't do much. Devonta Parker has a pretty good opportunity, as he has throughout the last 7-8 weeks of the season. He's acting on said opportunity and putting up some pretty good fantasy points. Then we have the Jets matchup with Andy Dalton coming back. Tyler Boyd, potentially Auden Tate, Alex Erickson. They could be good this week. I'm really just only investing in Boyd as of right now of the trio. Then moving on, we have Carolina Panthers giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers. It's a lot of yards to opposing wide receivers. Not too many touchdowns. To be honest, I know Michael Thomas scored in the back of the end zone last week. But this week, the Carolina Panthers, it's too easy of a matchup. I mean, when you play against the Washington Redskins, what are the Redskins going to do? I really don't think Terry McLaurin can be trusted at this point. He had a lot of targets, but again, a lot of overthrown passes, and it makes it difficult. But hopefully Terry McLaurin gets it done. We'll see. Moving on, the Oakland Raiders. Oakland has to take on Tyreek Hill. That's going to be quite a mess, so Tyreek should have a good week. And we have the Arizona Cardinals playing against Kupp, who's been very quiet in the last couple of weeks. Robert Woods, who had a little bit of an increase of opportunity a couple nights ago. And we'll see how that goes. In terms of the more difficult matchups, we have the Cleveland Browns down here against a rookie quarterback in Hodges. That might not be too bad. Obviously, Cleveland could probably clamp down on them like they did a couple weeks ago. Then we have the Green Bay Packers against Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones will get the job done. I'm not really worried about him against this Green Bay secondary. Then we have the Chiefs, the Broncos, 49ers, Cowboys. All right, so here's the thing. The Cowboys, Bills, Chargers, Bears, and Patriots, right? So the Patriots take on Deshaun Watson. That's not going to be fun for Watson, nor is it going to be fun for either of those two wide receivers. So that's going to be difficult. The Chicago Bears take on Jeff Driscoll. That could be pretty easy, but they played him a couple weeks back, and he was able to kind of score a little bit here and there. But I do think that Chicago will play better this week, coming off of a win. The Chargers are probably potentially playing against Drew Lock, maybe having his first NFL start of the season. The guy that they drafted this year. So there's a potential that the Chargers might feast on a rookie quarterback. And then we have the Bills and the Cowboys playing one another. Obviously, the Cowboys are going to throw the ball a bunch. And obviously, Josh Allen's going to have to throw the ball a bunch in order to keep up. So this could end up being a defensive matchup, but I'm assuming both wide receiver cores will be somewhat successful this week in the matchup. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the top 36 wide receivers of the week as of right now, as I have them. Here we go. Starting from the top, this is going to be quick. Again, just like I talked about with the running back video. I don't want to talk about a player for more than a minute. If I end up doing so, I'm ranting, okay? And I don't want to do that. I want to get quick, concise opinions on these players. A lot of them, you're already starting, and you don't need to be convinced of doing so because they are better, and they have been producing over the last couple weeks. So, again, we're going to be quick, we're going to be concise, and we're going to get after it. Number one, Michael Thomas, the best wide receiver in the National Football League, has already gotten over 100 catches thus far this season. He has been absolutely incredible. There has not been a game in the last 7 weeks in which he's had less than 10 targets. He's incredible. In the last 6 games, he has had over 100 receiving yards in 5 of those games. He is absolutely, actually, what is that? In the last 7 games, he has 6 100-yard performances. He's one of the best in the game. He's absolutely losing his mind out there with such a high completion percentage, 124 targets, 104 receptions. He's number one. It's not even close. Moving on. Davante Adams. Playing against the New York Giants secondary, it's far too easy of a matchup in my opinion. I think Davante Adams will be able to take advantage of said matchup because, you have Aaron Rodgers, sure, but this offense is somewhat stagnating at this moment in time, and they absolutely need to go ahead and feed Davante Adams in order to get him back into the groove. I expect them to do so this week. Again, Allen Robinson last week feasted against this defense of the Giants, and that is not the first wide receiver to do so in the last couple weeks. So Davante Adams, he will be my number 2 on the week. Moving on to number 3, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, again, is a boomer bust kind of play. Now, unfortunately, the injury that he sustained on that Monday night isn't really a bust, and really, I think he's been booming ever since he's come back from injury. I mean, just going and looking at what Tyreek Hill has done since his return. Where is Tyreek? Thank you, Tyreek Hill. Since his return, 22 points, 15 points, 11 points, 25 or 24 points, 28 points. He has been booming every single week. He has scored, outside of that, Monday night game in week 11, outside of that, he had 5 touchdowns in 5 games. He has been awesome. And as of right now, from what I've seen between him and Patrick Mahomes, they're progressing to a point where they're just going to continue to feed the guy 10 plus targets a game, which is absolutely beautiful. The more opportunity he gets, more upside he has. Tyreek Hill's number 3. Moving on to Chris Godwin, number 4, a guy that took a couple passes for 70 yards and a touchdown last week. The guy's just insane. As of right now, in terms of fantasy points, he is the number 2 wide receiver with 34 less catches than Michael Thomas. Yes, that is insane, but I mean, he's honestly really close because he has 3 more touchdowns than Michael Thomas. This is a guy that has been absolutely insane, losing his mind. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense, I don't think, is going to be able to contain the offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think Chris Godwin's going to continue to feast. Again, he didn't have a huge, reception count. He just made plays with his legs. After the catch, he was dominant. He was running over defenders. He was running past defenders, and that's what I hopefully will, see this week. As Mike Evans is guarded by AJ Boyle on the other side of the field, and they're worrying about him. Chris Godwin's going to run free. He's going to be good. He's my number 4. Moving on to DJ Chark. In that exact same matchup, we have Nick Foles playing against his secondary that gives up the most points to opposing wide receivers. DJ Chark, even though he was quite quiet this past week, he is still one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. 6 targets, had 5 receptions, had a 2-point conversion, had 40 receiving yards. Not a terrible game. Could have absolutely been better because we have seen better from this guy. Obviously, going from 15 targets to 6 targets is a struggle, but we are going to hopefully see him rejoice and, potentially have himself a pretty big game here against Tampa Bay. I expect him to do well. He's my number 5. Moving to number 6, Jarvis Landry. He's caught a touchdown in each of the last 4 games. 5 touchdowns in 4 games. Jarvis Landry is doing what I thought he would do in the preseason. In my predictions for the preseason, I said Jarvis Landry is probably one of the biggest sleepers. For the first, 8 weeks of the season, goodness gracious, Jarvis Landry had me in the dumpster. But man, as of late, he has been incredible. 10 targets, 13 targets, 10 targets, 7 targets, 13 targets. It is getting out of control. The matchups will eventually get out of control as they play Pittsburgh once again, which Jarvis had a touchdown against. Then Cincinnati. It's going to be fantastic this week. Jarvis is my number 6, and I am 100% confident because he continues to get the target counts and he continues to produce with them. He's my number 6. Moving on. Amari Cooper, number 7. I expect Amari Cooper to have a bounce-back game. 0 catches against the New England Patriots. That is crazy. And I expect him to, yes, on a short week, he is still, he's got a knee injury. He's going to have Tre'Davious White on him. But he has a lot to prove. And I expect him to get it done. I expect Amari Cooper to be a force to be reckoned with this week. Even though, as of right now, there's always the potential that, hey, we have to worry about, Amari Cooper, knee, blah, blah. They're going to be inside. There's no weather conditions. And I expect him to feast. They're going to feed him the ball. They're going to make it a statement to get him more involved. And he should be pretty good. He's my number 7. Moving on to number 8, DJ Moore. DJ Moore has been incredible. As of the last couple weeks, DJ Moore has really stepped into that upper echelon wide receiver. And respectively for his team, he is, outside of McCaffrey, he's the next best guy. And at times, he's just doing so much. It's insane. Because really, he started off really slow this season. But in the last couple weeks, he puts together the yard counts. He gets over his 10 points, but he's been going above and beyond in the last couple of weeks. Just this past week, caught 2 touchdowns in a singular week. His target counts are absolutely insane. Since week 5, 8, 10, 9, 10, 11, 15, 9. That's wide receiver 1 numbers. And he is a number 1 wide receiver. He's producing as such. And that's why we're going to put him in the top 12 because he's going crazy. He plays Washington. All right, moving on. We have Edelman as my number 9. Julian Edelman, again, similar to a guy like DJ Moore. Edelman continues to see a high target count and will always continue to see the high target count because Mohamed Sanu's now injured. They don't have much depth to the wide receiver position. The guy has had double-digit targets for the last 6 weeks, and he's produced every single week with more than 10 points. He's only had 2 weeks in which he's had less than 10 points in half-point PPR scoring formats. Houston's honestly an easy matchup. He should be great this week. He's my number 9. Moving on to number 10, Odell Beckham Jr. Now, I know many of you may be thinking, Andrew, yes, he played Miami last week. He had a good week, but is this a fluke? I honestly do believe that it is not a fluke. They are going to continue to pass the ball. When they play against Pittsburgh, it might be tough at times to run the ball, so they are going to make it a purpose, once again, to feed a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. When Jarvis Landry is going crazy in the slot or on the other side of the field, they're going to have to, respect that. And eventually, Odell Beckham will find himself open, and he's going to have another big week, in my opinion. In the last couple of weeks, 12 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets. Sure, it's been regressing at times, but it's because they've ran the ball so much, and I expect this Sunday for Odell Beckham to get back on track once again and have himself a pretty good week. He's my number 10. Moving on to number 11, Stefon Diggs off of the bye week. Diggs, last time we saw Diggs, he had a crazy good game against, Chris Harris Jr. And that's something that a lot of receivers don't have. Having 120 receiving yards and a touchdown against him, yeah, it was one big play over the top, but you don't see that often. Now that we have Adam Thielen coming back, practicing, healthy, there is going to be an opportunity for both of these guys to be wide receiver ones every single week because they are going to alleviate pressure from one another on opposite sides of the field. Sure, this is a run-first team. Sure, Kyle Rudolph is vulturing touchdowns in the red zone, but I expect yard count, target count, to be up there for a guy like Stefon Diggs with the upside of a touchdown with him and Thielen. Stefon Diggs is my number 11. I got a lot of confidence in him this week. Moving on. Number 12, DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, so here's the thing. I 100% understand the thought process of, hey, Stephon Gilmore has not allowed somebody to catch the ball in like 3 weeks. I think that's the stat that I heard. I understand that. I'm 100% aware of said statistic. But am I really worried about it with a guy like DeAndre Hopkins? DeAndre Hopkins, outside of Michael Thomas, in my opinion, in terms of talent and being able to play the wide receiver position, is the next best wide receiver in the NFL. It is going to be difficult for me to sit DeAndre Hopkins despite the matchup. It is a home game. We are not going to have weather conditions or any sort of that. There is no injury that ails DeAndre Hopkins like it did to Amari Cooper. I think DeAndre Hopkins is going to honestly just still be a pretty decent wide receiver play. Sure, if he doesn't score his touchdown, he gets 10 points, 12 points. I'm okay with that. But I'm expecting him to at least have some sort of upside because he always will have the potential of doing so because he's such a good wide receiver. I'm still starting DeAndre Hopkins. He's my number 12 on the week. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about my 13 through 24 wide receivers, starting off with Tyler Lockett, number 13. I know Tyler Lockett was quite quiet this past week, but I'm not really concerned about that. It happens. Some wide receivers just disappear at times, and that's okay. And I'm willing to understand, okay, you know what? You were triple teamed at times. You didn't see too many targets. 2 targets, it happens. So be it. I'm going to live with that. This coming week, Xavier Rhodes is probably going to still be on DK Metcalf. And what is that going to open up? We have Trey Waynes trying to cover Tyler Lockett. And by all means, whoever decides to cover Tyler Lockett is not going to have a fun time. His speed over the top, he is going to be far more healthy than he was last week. Still, week 11 bye, came off, still looked a little bit As of right now, in terms of Tyler Lockett, what he's capable of doing, I have all the confidence in the world to continue playing him. I just want to go ahead and check something really quickly for Seattle. This past week, Tyler Lockett played 86% of snaps while DK Metcalf played 88%. It's not like Tyler Lockett is slowing down or anything. Not one bit. He's continuing to see a high snap count, and it's not like they're pulling him for no reason. No. He just didn't see targets because that's just how the game went. And Rashad Penny came in, dominated. Both teams were just not at the top of their game. But I expect Tyler Lockett to get back to the top. He's my number 13. Moving on to Adam Thielen, my number 14. Coming off the hamstring injury. Should get re-implemented. Should see some targets. And honestly, in this matchup against Seattle, I expect it to be a back-and-forth scoring event between these two teams. Again, these are two teams that are trying to win their said divisions and trying to, at the same time, stay in that wild card race because the teams ahead of them, the 49ers and the Green Bay Packers, they've got good records. So this is a really big game between two NFC hitters that should be fun. And I expect Adam Thielen to be used a lot and shouldn't be a pitch count and should be good for him. He's my number 14. Moving on to 15, Keenan Allen, playing against Chris Harris Jr., again, one of the top corners in the last couple of weeks. Chris Harris has been scored on. John Brown still scored, even though he didn't catch the ball many times. There's always an opportunity that Keenan Allen can find the paint and score in the red zone, which is exactly what we want. But again, we have to understand that Keenan Allen has never been one of these, I'm going to catch 10 touchdowns in a season kind of guy. So expect him to get his target count. Sure, he's had 10 plus targets 4 out of the last 5 weeks. Expect that. Expect the yards. Expect the receptions. But do not expect an upside touchdown. That's why he sits at 15 today. Moving on. Number 16, Will Fuller. All right, so I'm thinking to myself, the only way that Deshaun Watson can produce, because it's going to be difficult for them to run the ball with Carlos Hyde, is to pass the ball. If DeAndre Hopkins is on one side of the field struggling, or in fact having some double coverage, Will Fuller is going to have to step up, and I expect him to do so with the deep ball, short ball. We've seen Will Fuller haul in 14 targets before, and that is not really so much of a surprise. So as of right now, In terms of Will Fuller and what I expect from him, I expect him to have to step up and potentially have himself a good week here. He's my number 16. All right, moving on. Let's go ahead and talk about number 17, Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a little tricky because Mike Evans is a good wide receiver. But unfortunately, he hasn't seen the end zone in the last 3 weeks. And that is a big difference maker. Because, prior to these last 3 weeks, he had back-to-back 30-point performances of over 10 catches. And I talked about it with you guys. Exactly after week 9, I talked about it in week 10, that there's no way that Mike Evans can consecutively have these kind of performances. It is not a reliable thing. You're not going to see Mike Evans have every week 10-plus touches or 10-plus grabs. He never has done that in his career, and it is insane to expect him to do so. So he's slowed down. Hopefully this week against Jacksonville, he can pick it back up because the upcoming matchups, yes, they're not terrible, but hopefully teams are starting to respect Godwin on the other side a little bit more and could potentially give Mike Evans a little bit of slack and give him an opportunity to maybe over the top score a touchdown. I'm hoping that's the case because he really needs it as of late. Especially for fantasy owners. Moving on, 18 is Calvin Ridley. I expect Julio potentially to miss this week. Julio's right after him. So let me talk about both these guys at once. Calvin Ridley has been incredible in the last couple of weeks. Is it a surprise? No, because they have had very good matchups and they're actually feeding him the ball. Now, Calvin Ridley scored a touchdown in garbage time last week. Pure garbage time. Nothing less, nothing more. And is that something to be ashamed of? Absolutely not. I don't think that scoring in garbage time is a big deal. I mean, at the end of the day, he is still scoring for your team, and that is perfectly fine. And I'm 100% okay with whether or not whether it's Matt Ryan throwing him the ball or Matt Schaub. I don't care. In the last 2 weeks, has had over 200 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, 14 grabs. Perfect. Plays New Orleans. Sure, New Orleans has got a tough defense. But Calvin Ridley might end up being the number 1 wide receiver on this team. And if he is, then he's going to have 10-plus targets in order to be relevant. If Julio's out, then Gage gets the boost, and so does Calvin Ridley. And as of right now for Julio, he sits at number 19 because he hasn't looked good. He has not been a good wide receiver since week 3. I'm going to be totally honest. Julio is actually quite depressing because he should be popping off. But it's the quarterback play. It's his injuries. The combination of the two has kept him as just being an average wide receiver. That's truly just the fact of the matter. In the last 5 weeks, he's only passed 20 points once. He's passed 100 yards twice. Sure, that's great, but he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3. That's brutal, and that's why he sits at 19 because I don't expect him to play this week. But if he does, he's going to be injured with one wing. He's got a shoulder injury. We'll see how that goes, especially with Marshawn Lattimore. It's going to be tough. Cooper Kupp at 20. Cooper Kupp's been terrible. Why? Because Jared Goff has been terrible. Now, you get to play against the Arizona Cardinals, far easier matchup. And as of right now, I think it'll be fine. In terms of Cooper Kupp, last week, 10 targets, perfectly fine. Arizona's an easy enough matchup where he should be able to play and play well. Courtland Sutton. Moving on to Courtland Sutton, what do we got here? Courtland's been pretty decent. If, in fact, they make a change at the quarterback position, I'd be a little concerned. Last week had 8 targets, but only caught the ball once. That's terrible. That is absolutely terrible. But that's the first time he's done that this year, in which he's really just had a terrible game. So as of right now, I'm pretty confident in Courtland Sutton. We'll see what the quarterback change brings to us. Again, it's a good secondary. But if, in fact, Drew Lock wants to lock in on Courtland Sutton, he should be fine. Moving on to 22, Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup, again, this offense is going to have to throw the ball a lot. They really just, that's what they've relied upon all season long. Michael Gallup is continuously playing well. Whether the matchup is difficult or not, he doesn't care. He really does not care. They're going to continue to feed him the ball. He's played well in the back half of the season after he's come back from his surgery. And as of right now, I have a lot of confidence in Michael Gallup as the top 24. He sits at number 22. Moving on to T.Y. Hilton. T.Y. Hilton still dealing with injuries, a little bit of tightness in his calf, blah, blah, blah. We'll see exactly where this is going to lead. And whether he's going to play this week, I expect him to do so, and I expect him to play well against Tennessee secondary. But again, this is a guy that's been dealing with injury, and you have to be a little bit precautious because you don't want to play a guy that could potentially in one quarter be gone and ends up with a goose egg on your starting lineup. Moving on, we have Allen Robinson at number 24. Even though Allen Robinson was great and he put up great numbers, I'm not losing my mind over Allen Robinson because this is the first week in a while that he's had a very good performance. This is week 12 was the first week since week 7 that he had a breakout performance. Outside of that, he was an average wide receiver, not really scoring touchdowns, not really seeing too many targets, but he has played well against Detroit in the past, And the Thursday night matchup, again, if they're going to force feed Allen Robinson the ball, he should be decent. He's the top 24 wide receiver as of right now. Let's go to move on. Let's close out today's video with my 25 through 36 rankings. Starting off at number 25, Devonta Parker, a guy I've been talking about for the last God knows how many weeks, and for good reason. The guy's been incredible in the last 3 weeks, 10 plus targets every single week. His yard count is absolutely there. His touchdowns, yes, they're few and far between as of late, but he is still getting the job done in terms of half PPR, full PPR formats. When your quarterback's a gunslinger and doesn't really care, he's going to feed you the ball, which is perfectly fine. John Brown at 26. Now, here's my concern. John Brown is a good wide receiver. He's going to probably see a good amount of targets against the secondary. But again, this is a very good secondary. This is not a joke. I mean, Awuzie is a pretty good cornerback, and he's probably going to be all over John Brown the entire game. And sure, John Brown has produced this year, but I'm still a little concerned. John Brown always will get to his 10-point lock. He will always get to the 10-point lock. I just personally think that everybody above him as of right now is more capable of surpassing that 10-point lock than he is. So that's what he is. He's always been that 10-point lock with the upside of a touchdown. If he scores a touchdown and still gets 10 points, perfectly fine. You've just been bailed out, just like last week. But as of right now, I'm just a little sketched out about the matchup. We'll leave him at 26. Moving on to 27, DK Metcalf. DK's got to catch some touchdowns, man. He's been given a hell of a lot of opportunities, and Minnesota's a very good opportunity on top of that. He's been, again, when you drop 3 passes that all could have been huge plays and could have made your week, it hurts. But again, this is a guy that eventually will get there. His catching percentage is not great. He's got 38 catches on 70 targets. That's not great. But again, it's a learning process for the rookie. He'll get there. He will improve. And as of right now, in terms of the matchup being so favorable, I expect DK to be decent this week. Hopefully he scores a touchdown. If not, still going to be a decent play. Moving on to number 28, Marquise Brown. Marquise Brown is crazy, right? So very volatile. We talked about it on Sunday. On whether or not this guy has any value. He's been hurt all season long. Comes in and catches 2 slants for 2 touchdowns in such a quick fashion that it's just insane. Because truth be told, that's just what he is. He is a volatile player. He's going to catch the ball 4 to 5 times, and if he does it for 2 touchdowns, that's just what he does. With this offense being on fire, it's beautiful. He has the speed to burn a guy like Richard Sherman this week. Are they going to utilize him that way? I hope so. If they do, he has the upside of a touchdown. As of right now, I'm not 100% convinced that they're going to let this guy run free, but we'll see what happens. Either way, he's a pretty decent play at this point. Wide receiver 3 with upside. Moving on, Deebo Samuel, 29. Speaking of this matchup, Deebo Samuel's on the other side, and Deebo has to play against one of the best secondaries in the league right now with, Humphreys and Peters and Earl Thomas. These guys are actually unbelievable back there. They have been playing very well. And as of right now, Deebo Samuel seems to be the number 1 wide receiver of this team. In terms of receiving targets, it's him and Kittle at the top 2. And then we have Emmanuel Sanders slugging from behind, still injured. So we'll see where Deebo will lie by the end of the week. But as of right now, I'm just a little concerned about him. So he sits at 29. Moving on to 30, A.J. Brown. Coming out of a big performance, he gets to play against a secondary that, in my opinion, got taken advantage of in the deep game a lot last week. Will Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins, both of them scoring big plays on just deep balls. The deep ball threat is always there. And the way that A.J. Brown has always been successful, at least thus far this season, when I go and I watch film, and I watched him against the Jaguars last week, and I watched him against the Atlanta Falcons earlier in the season. This is a guy that if you can throw the ball to him on a post over the middle of the field, 20, 25 yards down the field, yards after the catch is always there for him. He has the burners to get past the secondary into the third level and then eventually score. That's how you have to dominate and use him, and I honestly do expect them to use him in that fashion. Could be good this week. Moving on, 31, Jamison Crowder. Now, why have I moved Jamison Crowder so low? The reason is because this offense is functioning without him. Because of how well they functioned without him last week, getting passes to, I know Demaryius Thomas's touchdown was called back, but he did get in the end zone, and it was a BS call. Ryan Griffin, Le'Veon Bell, Robbie Anderson. There is a lot of guys scoring in this offense. There's always the potential that, a guy like Darnold's going to pull the ball and run the ball in like he's done in the past. Jamison Crowder needs to see his 10-plus targets. He needs to see what Jamison Crowder does the best? On the first drive of the game, if he does not score 8 points, his entire week goes to shit. That's how it works. That's what he's done in those weeks that he was great. On the first drive, he comes out and he's on fire. Hopefully he does that against Cincinnati. I'm starting him as a wide receiver 3. But again, the sketchiness kind of bothers me. Moving on, Tyler Boyd. With the return of a guy like Andy Dalton, hopefully we'll see something that he saw last week. With Andy Dalton, we saw Tyler Boyd get 11 targets, 10 targets, 11 targets, 14 targets, 14. We saw those high target counts. That's perfectly beautiful. 9 targets. We need to see more of that. Hopefully we'll get more of that because as of late, without Andy Dalton in the lineup, it hasn't been fun. There have been weeks he caught 1 pass for 0 yards. That is not acceptable. Last week had 100 yards receiving and a touchdown. He's a Pittsburgh kid. Perfect. Beautiful. Now you play against the Jets. You have an opportunity to take advantage of said matchup, and I think you could do so as my number 32. Moving on, 33, Robert Woods playing against the Arizona Cardinals. Easy matchup. Robert Woods has been better in the last couple of weeks in terms of at least getting his targets in his direction, but truly this receiving core has just been killed by the quarterback. The quarterback has been so awful that we cannot trust in a guy like Robert Woods to get it done every single week. But Arizona's matchup is far too good. But outside of missing that game due to a family issue on Sunday night against the Chicago Bears, in the last 2 games, 20 targets total, 13 receptions, 95 and 97 receiving yards. Beautiful. Should be a good wide receiver 3 with the upside option. Moving on, 34, Dede Westbrook. Again, Chark's going to be great. So are Dede Westbrook, potentially even Chris Conley. That's why I've been having a little bit of difficulty on which one's going to have the big boom play against this secondary. But I expect Dede Westbrook over the middle of the field. Checkdowns will always be a relevant fantasy option, so he's my number 34. Sterling Shepard with, in fact, Golden Tate in concussion protocol. He could potentially miss. If he is going to miss, I saw Sterling Shepard play 96% of offensive snaps last week for the Giants, and to be honest, if that's the case and he's going to continue to see those 9 targets, 5 receptions, that's beautiful. Against the Giants this week against the Packers this week could end up being good. My last option. It was tough because there's a lot of names. I could have put McLaurin here. I could have put, truth be told, a lot of other receivers. Christian Kirk is an eligible wide receiver that could be put in this spot. Who else did I forget? Emmanuel Sanders could be put here. There are a lot of other good wide receivers in the National Football League. I just thought that Kenny Golladay needs his respect. Kenny Golladay has always the potential. Him and Marvin Jones have the potential of scoring. Despite Driscoll's performance last week, he'll figure it out. And I honestly do believe Kenny Golladay will always have the opportunity of being a top 36 wide receiver in my eyes because he's far too talented, and no matter the quarterback play, he can still get the job done, and he's proven that he can get the job done. All right, that's it. Those are my top 36 wide receivers. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we will be doing a live stream for an hour. The first Thursday morning game, is at 9:30 Pacific Standard Time. So make sure you come. I'll have updated rankings, etc. set up, ready to go. Ask questions. We'll be here to hang out. It'll only be for an hour or so because obviously the games start. And if I start a little late, it's because I want to sleep in, but we'll see. 8:30 should be a pretty good spot. And I'll see you guys then. If you have not yet already, go check out that wide receiver video. I talk about a little bit of news and stuff like that. If you haven't already as well, click the subscribe button. Click today's like button. I appreciate all the support. It really does help me out a lot, guys. And until next time, which will be tomorrow morning. Hopefully you guys check it out. I'll see you guys. Peace.